The Democratic Alliance has suffered yet another resignation barely a week after the party's Gauteng member of the provincial legislature, Khume Ramulifho, called it quits. Yesterday, a member of parliament, Ghaleb Cachalia, announced his resignation from the official opposition, accusing the Democratic Alliance of trying to silence his views on the conflict in Gaza. Last year, Kachalia was sacked for his public anti-Israeli views. Now, do these two high-profile resignations signal internal squabbles within the Democratic Alliance? Joining me now is political analyst Dr Ongama Mtimka to help us understand exactly what's going on in the DA. Dr. Mtimka, thank you very much for your time. Let me not get into the nitty-gritties yet. Just get your sense when you hear that it is the second high-profile resignation that has come from the Democratic Alliance in 1 week. What's going on in this party?
Two things there. Good morning to you and your viewers, Xoli. So there are two things there. One, there are in the course of politicking, people rub each other the wrong way and they evaluate whether to stay or go. But when that happens ahead of an important election like this, in an environment in which there are splinter parties that are being formed, then what is ordinary differences within organizations becomes augmented by prospects of being able to achieve the same objectives outside of a particular political vehicle. So I think that what makes differences at this time to be a lot more consequential in terms of whether people stay or go has got to do with the election season.
I don't want to muddy the words of the person who resigned yesterday, Ghaleb Cachalia, so I'd like for both of us to hear in his own words what are some of the problems he found in the DA. Let's take a listen.
The way I've been treated has been completely authoritarian. Cease and desist orders, gagging orders, fatuous allegations about flouting policy when the policy doesn't even exist. Well, you know, this all speaks to dysfunction and authoritarianism. It is not the DA that I thought I was joining. This current leadership is off the mark. Moreover, when the previous leader resigned or was pushed out, whatever you choose to say, there was a review panel which said that basically he failed in these particular respects. And if you go back to the documents which I submitted, you can see, because I quoted from that review.
Ghaleb Cachalia there, in his own words. Dr. Mtimka, two words stand out for me: authoritarian and dysfunction. Is that what's plaguing the Democratic Alliance right now? And does it begin now, by the way?
Well, two things there. One, we do know that there has been a fallout between Mr. Kachalia and the party. He spoke on a matter that the Democratic Alliance regards as a political hot potato. The party finds itself in relation to Israel-Palestine in the same position that the ANC was on the matter of Russia in Ukraine. So it regards it as a political hot potato. Not only that, it is facing partners in the multi-party charter who prefer a more neutral and almost pro-Israeli stance on the matter. So it's complicated for the party. So what's happening now is a result of that fallout. Now let me come to the words which you cite, both in terms of what he just said and also what is in his letter. Now, because of the election season, Xoli, the politicians are going to try and frame what they say about their comings and goings in order to strategically prepare themselves for the next thing. So it is not enough that the fallout is about this Israel-Palestine matter. But what I think is happening is that Mr. Kachalia is carving a critique of the party which is similar, which he in fact frowned upon when Phumzile van Dam resigned from the party and said it was refusal to accept the internal processes. When we only had the letter of Mr. Kachalia, you would be forgiven for thinking that. I think he's right in saying there's no established policy of the party on the matter. But I think Xoli Mngambi, when he was speaking to Stephen yesterday, mentioned that there had been a caucus, a process in which the DA caucus was discussing the matter and arrived at a position. Now, that to me takes away this view, or in fact brings context to the view that, the DA is becoming authoritarian on this matter. I think this is more closer to what Mr. Kachalia himself characterized Phumzile van Dam's departure as an individual who's uncomfortable with the position of his party and is unable to change it.
You raised that interview between Stephen Grootes and the spokesperson of the DA, Xoli Mngambi, and Xoli Mngambi is asked a question, a simple question. Does the Democratic Alliance believe that what Israel is doing in Gaza amounts to genocide? He simply couldn't answer the question. But let's move to this, because I think a person who perhaps best describes or best captures what is exactly the problem with the Democratic Alliance, specifically on this question of the Israel-Gaza conflict or Israel-Hamas conflict. It is Khume Ramulifho, the leader who left here in Gauteng in the same week. Can we take a listen to Khume Ramulifho in a moment, and we'll come back to this discussion, Mr. Mtimka?
I recall as early as 2003, 2004, and I was saying, if we are there to defend and promote human rights and freedoms, that should also be pronounced through Palestine and Israel. Obviously, at the time I was told, we've got so many problems in areas like Zimbabwe, we must focus here locally. That's where there are human rights abuses and violations. But I said, for me, human rights and freedoms are not supposed to be subjected to where it's your vested interest is. It must be condemned at all, cost, wherever you see it taking place. In this instance, our DA leader has jumped to go to Ukraine saying, there are violations, there's war, which we all agree that we don't need war, we need peace in the world. But when it comes to issue of Israel and Palestine, we get told, there are a lot of issues locally. Let's focus on local matters, which is double standard.
Mr. Mtimka, I take it that you've heard Khume Ramulifho very clearly. Do you want to describe what he is saying, perhaps in a simpler language? I don't know.
So I think he's calling out the duplicity of the party when it comes to the Israel-Palestine matter, so close to how it characterized the invasion of Ukraine. So two things here. One, he's advancing the idea that if we commit to ideals and human rights, if they as a party commit to ideals and human rights, even when it affects their political economic alliances, it's important to call them out. And I think that he makes a very interesting point, and this is the point that Nelson Mandela grapples with when it comes to a tension between political alliances and principles which are broader than the real politic. But I think that he's spot on in the sense that not only does the duplicity of the Democratic Alliance, as well as, for example, the US and the UK on the matter of Israel-Palestine, not only is it exposed, but also it shows that when these debates about the tension between human rights and political economic alliances are usually value-laden and made complex. People mistake supporting, for example, the ideal of the existence of a state of Israel in the Middle East with a blank check attitude towards human rights violations. And in fact, even though you can trace the current violence that's taking place to the events of October 7, I think that there's an over politicization of the human rights issues when it comes to this matter.
Let's conclude the conversation then, Dr. Mtimka, because the one word that almost reminds me of someone who used to do exactly what you are doing for us now, who is no longer in this space, and that's Dr. His name escapes me now. He said at one point that the Democratic Alliance was self-mutilating in a corner, unprovoked. This is an election year.
That was Prof. Somadoda.
Indeed, Somadoda Figen. Is that something that the Democratic Alliance wants to be doing in an election year? And I want to also add another dimension, and that is that, is it clear now that the Democratic Alliance is somewhat being exposed by these leaders who are leaving on the question of whether or not the Democratic Alliance is a sympathizer to Israel? Are they likely to be punished for that?
Sure. I don't think, Xoli, that sympathizing with Israel per se is wrong in a region in which there are avowed, anti-Israeli national groups that want to wipe off the state of Israel off the map. However, the Democratic Alliance simply needed to have enough behavioral complexity to be able to process the commission of gross human rights violations, which are very evident, with its political support for the Israeli state. In the same way that the ANC, through President Cyril Ramaphosa, was able to side with Russia in a way that appeared to be actually pro-human rights violations, but be able to manage the politics of that by leading a process of wanting to intervene in the Israel-Ukraine conflict. So the point I'm making is that contradictions are there. There are contradictions, but there are ways to manage contradictions to satisfy both the ideals of creating a rules-based international order while also showing support to your political allies. But it's the sticking head in the sand approach that is problematic.
Dr. Mtimka, let me thank you very much for your time, Ongama Mtimka, giving us his analysis of what's going on in the main opposition in South Africa, the Democratic Alliance. Major resignations in 1 week. Is that a signal of the worst to come? I wonder.